Welcome back to another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports Podcast. Podcast where I talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s over today. Today's topic might be touchy for some, might be a topic that people might think I've gone too far, but I don't think I have. It's a stupid topic, but I'm going to talk about it anyway. And then, of course, it's the topic of Little League World Series. I prefer the 80s and 90s Little League World Series because in the 80s and 90s, it seemed like the Little League World Series was about the kids, about tiny towns around the world, in particular in this country. They got the opportunity and chance to play against kids from everywhere. And it still is today. I remember when I was a young child, a team from Japan came to Yonkers to play against the Yonkers All-Stars. And the Yonkers All-Stars had some great players on it. I wasn't on the team. I stunk at hitting. And they pummeled us 24-5. We had some good players to get some hits. This one kid named Bobby Nigrello, who was like a legend when I was a kid. You know, he pitched and he hit. He did his thing. But the Japanese kids were better. And then watching the Little League World Series over the years, I'm not saying that the world teams seem to be better. They just seem to be bigger, stronger, and faster. But in the 80s and 90s, it seemed that like the Little League teams were more realistic in America, especially. Meaning that you had 12 kids on the team, or less, or in some cases even more. And clearly, some of the kids were good at everything, and some of the kids were not good at anything. Maybe it was the coach's son. Maybe it was the coach's best friend's son. And of course, the big thing about today is the inclusion of girls, which doesn't bother me, because if you can play, you can play. And I knew and know of women, young girls back in the day when I worked at a summer camp in upstate New York, that some of the girls at the camp could play. And probably could play on their, local Little League teams. If given the opportunity, they desired to play soccer instead. I digress. But the Little League teams seem to be more realistic. This Little League crap that we got today is bothersome to me because of all of the 7,000 different rules that happen. Interchanging players. Now, I can understand catchers because you got to put the catcher equipment on and you're not a major leaguer and you ain't figured out yet how to do it quickly like the major league players do, or leave the shin guards on in innings where you're not batting, or little kids forget things and kids have difficulty at times putting on the catcher equipment. So I can understand a coach, manager saying, let's get Bobby out of the game so that so-and-so can pinch runs, so he can get the catcher's equipment on, and we go. Every time I do this show, and when I do things that are factual, truthful, meaningful, there's either kids playing in the pool screaming Marco Polo, or sirens going around, fire trucks, whatever. So clearly I'm hitting some nerves here that's bothering the earth. Anyway, I digress again. But the point of playing sports is you play to win the game. Participation trophies, I'm so happy and glad that I never got one. I remember a friend of mine played Little League in Yonkers on McLean Avenue. And he got a trophy at the end of the season, and it was his best sportsmanship because a great sense of humor. Because his batting average was 0.00. So was mine in Little League, by the way. But he got a trophy for having a 0.00 batting average, but just for having a good attitude. If someone gave me that trophy, I would have snapped it in half when I got home. While I was there, I would have been like, oh, shucks, but I would have snapped it in half. But the funny thing about today's Little League is now all 12 kids must hit. Last year or 2 years ago, it was all kids must play the field. This year, all kids must hit. And so if I'm on a Little League team here in California who always produces really good baseball teams, Little League, college, high school, whatever, if I'm fielding a team that's going to try to qualify for the Little League World Series, I'm not just getting my local teams anymore. I'm going to find me in my district or in my state potentially, if that's allowed, the best 12 players under the age of 12, under the age of 13, if that's the limits, boy or girl, and see if they can play. And if they can play and they can hit, they're on my team. And we're going on to take on whoever. That's like AAU basketball. AAU basketball, got no shame. My friend lives 3 towns over. Well, he can come play with us. He can come play basketball with us. And then he makes the team. Instead of taking kids from the local area to be whatever. I remember the team from Harlem. They were all kids from Harlem. The teams from Connecticut that won the World Series that had Chris Drury on it, the hockey player, but he was apparently a good baseball player as a kid. It seemed like it was all kids from local area. Kirkland, Washington's team. They specifically said from Kirkland, Washington. And they had some kid named Kirby something. I can't remember his last name, but he was the MVP. He struck out 14, I think it was Japanese players, and they won the Little League World Series in the 90s, early 90s. I mean, I'm amazed and appalled that is what Little League has become. To find the ringer pitcher, to find 12 ringer hitters in my state or possibly in my city who don't even live near us but plays Little League and makes our team. That's my first problem. My second problem is all 12 players have to hit. And I'm not talking about have to hit like as a pinch hitter. They have to be apparently in a lineup. So the lineup is 12 deep. And so 1 through 12, if you don't get a hit or walk or get on an error or what interference or anything like that, you go through the first 4 innings without having your best 3 hitters, which usually people put at the top of the lineup, getting another chance to hit until the 5th inning. Now, the last couple of days, a kid from China has pitched a no-hitter twice, not getting beyond the 4 innings because his team's offense is prolific. And he's apparently throwing 80 miles an hour, which is 107 miles an hour. And so if you got a pitcher like that and you are wiping away the competition and the competition doesn't get a second chance to bat against you, that ain't fair. I guess that's life. They got a pitcher that you can't hit. Or let's say you have a pitcher you can hit, but you can't get on base. So basically you leave it up to your second at bat in the 5th and 6th inning to possibly see if you can figure out this flamethrower. But wait a second. If they score 9 runs, 8 runs, 10 runs, game's over. So you don't even get a second chance. And then what's been happening also lately in the games is that teams are pitching great for 4 innings because they only get to face the best hitters in the 1st inning. So teams are pitching great. And so now this is where the argument comes back at me, the excitement of the game, because now the games are 1-1, 0-0, 3-2, 3-1, 3-0 in the 5th. And now the top of the order is back. And now it's time for them to rally. And it's happened. Japan rallied yesterday. Mexico rallied I believe yesterday as well. Curacao rallied the day before against Mexico, against Venezuela, because they got a chance to get their second pitchers up. I mean, second hitters up, excuse me. And they took advantage of a tiring pitcher and rallied to come back to win. And that's what the Little League World Series is now become. It's about the pitchers for the first 4 innings. And if he or she has gotten the stamina and is still strong enough to finish the game, they try to make him finish the game. Or they get lit up like has happened the last 2 days. And then you bring in a relief pitcher that's trying to put out a fire that can't, because now that team's crowd is into it. So now you're scared and nervous and you can't get it done. I don't know why sports of the 21st, 22nd century decide to change everything in every single damn sport. What was so bad about having 9 kids make your team, 12 kids make your team, 1 kid's playing as manager, 1 kid was a pinch runner, 1 kid was daddy's son or daddy's best friend or somebody's friend, and could come off the bench and pinch hit, pinch run, defend? What was wrong with that? Kids weren't getting enough TV time? Is the ultimate goal to win, or is the ultimate goal to give the kids TV exposure? The other thing that annoyed me is I have no problem with girls playing sports. Zero. I have a 14-year-old daughter. If my daughter is good enough to make men's teams, soccer teams, baseball teams, basketball teams, football teams, if she's good enough to make the teams and the boys don't bother her in other ways that will affect the way she plays, go for it. And even if they do bother her, I hope that she's tough enough to tell them to kick rocks. But the bottom line is, yesterday, this lovely young lady on the team from Tennessee, I guess got 2 hits or got a hit. And I guess she made history as the first girl to get a hit in an elimination game, or 2 hits in an elimination game, or more hit, whatever. And I started to think about Mo'ne Davis when she did it years ago and how celebrated that it was. And she got all this national exposure and was on the ESPYs. And supposedly now there's been 5 girls total that have made the Little League World Series and this, that, and the other thing. And I say to myself, girls are human beings too. Girls can play if you let them play. Maybe in the 80s and 90s they didn't let them play. Like I said, there were some girls who could play. There was a girl at my summer camp named Mickey Menard that could play. She could play everything. Football, basketball, baseball, soccer, hockey, whatever you wanted her to play, she could play. And in high school, she played. She played soccer until she tore her knee. But she was a stud. Isabel Sanche could play. Like, I could rally off names of females that could play baseball. So maybe the 80s, 90s, they didn't allow it in Little League. My league didn't have any girls. But we need to take a step back, I think, in this country. I understand this whole movement to uplift girls and women. I understand this movement to uplift Black people, uplift Latino people, uplift the Asian culture. I understand that. But we are not that nation. We're better than that. We don't need to do that. It's done. And every day to have it thrown in my face is annoying. The story of that game yesterday was the pitcher from Tennessee struck out 12 batters, didn't allow but 1 run, and now they're playing in another game to see if they could play in the United States Championship. What I don't like about ESPN these days is the sub-stories. We don't care about the sub-stories. We don't care that Shohei Ohtani goes 4 for 4 with 4 home runs and the Angels lose 5-4. We care that they lost 5-4. We don't care that LeBron James scored 58 points, grabbed 19 rebounds, had 21 assists, and they lost 145 to 138. We care that they lost. We don't care that Patrick Mahomes threw 9 touchdown passes, no interceptions for 701 yards, and the Chiefs lost 70 to 63 to Buffalo. All we care is that Buffalo won. But the stories in sports today is not about the winners. It's about plot B, part C, part D, part E, part F. And usually those parts may have led to a victory, but the story is the victory. And until we get back to that culture, I'm always going to criticize this era in sports. Because, frankly, I don't give a damn about how you won. I care about